The massive doors of the galactic combat arena opened with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the metal corridors. Tae-Won Kim adjusted his simple gray uniform and walked forward into the bright lights. His black combat boots made quiet sounds on the polished floor as he entered the most famous fighting arena in the galaxy. Above him, thousands of seats filled with creatures he had only seen in pictures before today. The Dreknari sat in one section, their green scales catching the light as they moved their large heads to watch him. They looked like giant lizards that walked on two legs, each one twice as tall as any human. Their yellow eyes followed his every step. In another section, the Chiton collective buzzed and clicked to each other. These insect-like beings had 6 arms each and moved in perfect sync with their neighbors. Their black shells shined under the arena lights, and their compound eyes reflected the colors around them like tiny mirrors. The Lumina section glowed with soft blue light. These energy beings had no solid bodies that Tae-Won could see clearly. They appeared as floating clouds of bright particles that shifted and moved like living stars. Sometimes they took shapes that looked almost human, but then they would change again into something completely different. High above in the premium viewing area sat the Vorthak. These tall, thin creatures had pale gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through everything. They had 4 arms that ended in long fingers, and they rarely moved at all. Tae-Won had heard they could read minds, which made him slightly uncomfortable. At the center of it all stood Arena Master Koltek. The massive Vorthak was easily the biggest creature Tae-Won had ever seen in person. He had 6 powerful arms and stood nearly 4 meters tall. His voice boomed through speakers that reached every corner of the arena. "Welcome, beings from across the galaxy, to the Grand Melee Tournament," Koltek announced. His words came out slowly and clearly, translated instantly into every language spoken by the crowd. "Today begins the most honored competition in known space. Here the greatest warriors test their skills against endless enemies in combat that pushes the limits of mind and body." Tae-Won looked around at the other competitors who stood with him on the arena floor. There was Vextar the Destroyer, the current record holder. The huge Dreknari warrior had thick green scales covered in old battle scars. His yellow eyes burned with confidence as he gripped a massive energy sword in his clawed hands. Everyone said he was the most dangerous fighter in the galaxy. Next to Vextar stood Hive Commander Ziktal from the Chiton Collective. Unlike his brethren in the stands, this one moved independently. His 6 arms each held a different weapon, and his movements were quick and sharp. The chittering sounds he made seemed almost like laughter. The Lumina representative called itself Flux Prime. It appeared as a constantly shifting cloud of bright blue and white energy. Sometimes Tae-Won could make out shapes that looked like weapons or shields forming within the glowing mass, then dissolving and reforming into something else. The Vorthak competitor was named Mindrender Kethvar. He stood perfectly still, his 4 arms crossed over his thin chest. His large black eyes never blinked as he stared at each competitor in turn. When those eyes focused on Tae-Won, the human felt a strange pressure in his head, like someone trying to peek into his thoughts. Tae-Won was the only human in the competition. At average height and build, he looked small and weak compared to the other fighters. His equipment was simple compared to their advanced weapons and armor. He carried a basic pulse rifle, a sidearm, and some grenades. His armor was standard, military issue, nothing special or high-tech. "The rules are simple," Arena Master Koltek continued. "Each competitor enters the combat zone alone. The arena's systems will generate holographic enemies of increasing difficulty. The longer you survive, the more enemies you face, and the stronger they become. Your biosigns are monitored at all times for safety, but the mental strain is very real." He gestured to the large display screens around the arena. The current record stands at 47,132 confirmed enemy eliminations, achieved by Vextar the Destroyer over his 7-year career in these games. Today, one of these warriors may challenge that record. The crowd made various sounds of excitement. The Dreknari roared. The Chiton clicked rapidly. The Lumina pulsed brighter, and the Vorthak remained silent but somehow felt more focused. In the human section of the crowd, which was quite small, a few Earth diplomats and support staff watched, nervously. Captain Dong-hyun Lee sat in the front row, his hands gripping the rail tightly. This was humanity's first time in the competition, and a lot depended on how well Taewon performed. Most competitors last between 3 and 6 hours before exhaustion forces them to withdraw, Koltek explained. The record for longest single session belongs to War Chief Gormek of the Draknari, who fought for 14 hours and 17 minutes before collapsing from fatigue. Gormek, sitting in the Draknari section, stood and roared proudly. His fellow warriors banged their weapons against their armor in approval. The arena's artificial intelligence adapts to each fighter's style and capabilities. The arena master continued. It learns from every move you make and creates enemies designed to challenge your specific skills. No two battles are ever the same. Taewon listened carefully to every word. He had studied recordings of previous tournaments for months, learning about the different enemy types and scenarios the arena could create, but he knew that watching and experiencing were very different things. Contestants may use any weapons or equipment they bring with them, Koltek said. The arena provides basic ammunition and energy recharges, but strategy and skill determine victory. Medical teams stand ready, but remember that while the enemies are holographic, the exhaustion and stress you feel are completely real. The arena. Master's 6 arms gestured to the combat zone below. It was a large circular area surrounded by high walls. The floor looked like metal, but Taewon knew it could change to simulate any environment the AI chose to create. Who will enter first? Koltek asked. Vextar stepped forward immediately, his massive sword catching the light. I will show these newcomers how a true warrior fights, he declared. His voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. The recall. Crowd cheered as Vextar walked to the center of the arena floor. Taewon watched carefully as the great Draknari warrior prepared for battle. This would be his chance to see exactly what he was up against. But first, he had to watch and learn. The real test would come when it was his turn to enter the arena and face whatever enemies the AI decided to send against him. Vextar's demonstration lasted exactly 4 hours and 12 minutes. The massive Draknari warrior had destroyed 3,147 holographic enemies before the arena's medical systems forced him to stop. His breathing was heavy, his scales were slick with sweat, and his powerful arms shook from exhaustion. The crowd had cheered wildly as he left the combat zone. Impressive as always, Arena Master Koltek announced. Vextar shows why he remains our champion. Who wishes to compete next? Taewon stepped forward. I will go next. The crowd's reaction was immediate and not encouraging. Several Draknari warriors laughed out loud, their deep voices echoing through the arena. The Khitan collective made clicking sounds that their translators rendered as amused chittering. Even some of the glowing lumina seemed to pulse in what looked like laughter. War Chief Gormek stood up in the Draknari section and pointed at Taewon with one massive clawed finger. Look at this tiny creature, he called out. He carries primitive weapons and wears simple armor. I bet 50 credits he will not last 2 hours. Other Draknari quickly took the bet. Soon, half the arena was placing wagers on how quickly the human would be defeated. The odds were not in Taewon's favor. Captain Dong-hyun Lee sat forward in his seat, worry clear on his face. This was not going well for humanity's reputation. In the human section, Dr. Hee-jin Cho checked her medical, monitoring equipment one more time. She would be watching Taewon's vital signs throughout his battle. Very well, human Taewon Kim, Arena Master Koltek said. Enter the combat zone and prepare yourself. The arena will begin with basic scenarios and increase difficulty as you progress. Taewon walked to the center of the circular floor. His pulse rifle felt comfortable in his hands, and his equipment was arranged exactly how he liked it. He had trained for this moment for months, but he knew that training and real experience were different things. Beginning simulation, the arena's computer voice announced. The metal floor around Taewon began to change. Walls rose up from the ground, creating the layout of a space station corridor. The lighting dimmed to simulate emergency power conditions. The first enemies appeared. At the far end of the corridor, they were basic security drones, floating metal spheres with simple energy weapons. Nothing too dangerous, just enough to test basic reflexes and aim. Taewon raised his rifle and fired. The first drone exploded in a shower of sparks and light, then the second, then the third. His shots were clean and precise with no wasted movement or ammunition. In the stands, some of the aliens nodded with mild approval. The human's aim was decent for such a primitive creature, but this was still just the beginning phase of the simulation. More drones appeared, moving faster and shooting more accurately than the first group. Taewon moved smoothly along the corridor, using the walls for cover and picking off targets with steady, measured shots. His breathing remained calm and his hands were perfectly steady. "Kill count 100, the arena announced. The scenario changed. Now Taewon found himself on the deck of a pirate ship, facing armed raiders who moved and fought like living beings. These holographic enemies could think and adapt, making them much more dangerous than simple drones. Taewon adjusted his tactics immediately. He used the ship's cargo containers for cover and moved constantly to avoid being surrounded. When 3 pirates tried to flank him, he tossed a grenade that eliminated all of them at once. The crowd made sounds of mild interest. Kill count 500. In the Draknari section, some of the warriors stopped laughing. The human was lasting longer than they had expected, but this was still early in the simulation, when the enemies were relatively weak. The arena changed again. Taewon now stood in a military compound under attack by enemy soldiers. These holographic warriors wore armor and carried advanced weapons. They moved in coordinated groups and used proper military tactics. This was where most new competitors began to struggle. The jump from simple enemies to organized military units often caught fighters off guard. Many made critical mistakes when the pressure increased. Taewon did not make mistakes. He identified the enemy squad leaders and eliminated them first, causing confusion in their ranks. He used the compound's defenses against the attackers, turning automated turrets to his advantage. His movements were smooth and efficient, with no wasted effort. Kill count 1,000. Dr. Hyejin Cho studied her medical readings with growing interest. Taewon's heart rate was elevated, which was normal for combat situations, but his breathing pattern was steady. His stress hormones were within acceptable ranges, and his brain activity showed focused concentration rather than panic or strain. The simulation continued to evolve. Taewon fought through burning buildings, defended orbital platforms against boarding parties, and cleared underground tunnels filled with hostile creatures. Each scenario was more challenging than the last, but his performance remained consistent. Kill count 3,000. Some aliens in the crowd were starting to pay closer attention. The human had been fighting for over 3 hours now, longer than many had expected. His technique was not flashy like Vextar's powerful sword work, but it was undeniably effective. Kill count 5,000. Flux Prime, the Lumina competitor, pulsed with curiosity. The energy being had been watching Taewon's fighting style with great interest. Unlike other species who relied on superior strength or advanced technology, the human seemed to depend on something else entirely. Kill count 7,000. War Chief Gormek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was starting to regret his bet. The human had already lasted longer than most rookie competitors managed in their first tournament appearance. As Taewon entered his 6th hour of continuous combat, the arena began deploying more sophisticated enemies. Armored vehicles, flying attack craft, and elite soldier units that would challenge even experienced warriors. The human adapted to each new threat without hesitation. When facing tanks, he used terrain to his advantage and struck at weak points in their armor. Against flying enemies, he found elevated positions and used their own speed against them. Elite soldiers found themselves outmaneuvered by tactics they had never encountered before. Kill count 8,047. The arena fell quiet. Taewon had been fighting for exactly 8 hours and 15 minutes. His kill count was respectable for a first-time competitor, though still far below the record holders. But something was different about his performance. Other fighters showed clear signs of fatigue by this point. Slower reflexes, labored breathing, decreased accuracy. Taewon showed none of these symptoms. His final shot eliminated a holographic enemy commander, and the simulation paused. Taewon lowered his weapon and looked up at Arena Master Kolthek. "I request permission to continue tomorrow," he said calmly. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. Continue tomorrow? Most competitors needed several days of rest between sessions. The human wanted to come back the next day? Arena Master Kolthek's 6 arms gestured in confusion. "You wish to continue your session tomorrow? Are you certain you do not require extended recovery time?" "I just need a meal and an equipment check," Taewon replied. "I will be ready to continue in the morning." The aliens stared at him in disbelief. After 8 hours of intense combat, the human looked like he had just finished a light training exercise. News of the human's request to continue spread through the space station like wildfire. By morning, the arena was packed with curious aliens who wanted to see if Taewon would actually return. Many had expected him to quietly withdraw during the night, claiming equipment failure or sudden illness as most embarrassed competitors did. But at exactly 0800 station time, Taewon walked through the arena doors. He looked well-rested and alert, carrying the same simple equipment he had used the day before. His uniform was clean, his weapons were freshly maintained, and his step was confident. Arena Master Kolthek's 6 arms moved in what humans would recognize as surprise. "Human Taewon Kim, you have returned. Are you certain you wish to continue your session without extended rest?" "Yes," Taewon replied simply. "I am ready to begin." In the stands, the alien spectators buzzed with excitement. The Draknari section was fuller than it had been the previous day. Word had reached their military commanders that something unusual was happening, and they wanted to observe this strange human phenomenon firsthand. Flux Prime floated in the Lumina section, pulsing with brighter colors than before. The energy being had spent the night analyzing combat recordings from the previous day, trying to understand the humans' fighting methods. The patterns made little sense compared to known combat doctrines. The Vorthak section remained as quiet as always, but more of them were present. Mind Render Kethvar sat perfectly still, his large black eyes focused intently on the human below. The telepaths were deeply curious about Taewon's mental state, but their attempts to read his thoughts had yielded confusing results. Dr. Hyejin Cho checked her monitoring equipment again. Taewon's vital signs were exactly what she would expect from someone who had gotten a good night's sleep. His stress levels were actually lower than they had been when he first entered the arena yesterday. Resuming simulation at previous difficulty level, the arena computer announced. The combat zone transformed around Taewon. This time, he found himself in a military staging area under heavy assault. The enemies were no longer basic drones or simple pirates. These were coordinated military units with advanced tactics, heavy weapons, and air support. Most competitors would struggle with this level of challenge, especially at the beginning of a session when they were still warming up. But Taewon moved into action as if he had never stopped fighting. His first target was an enemy commander directing troops from behind an armored transport. A single precise shot eliminated the leader, causing immediate confusion in the enemy ranks. Taewon used that confusion to reposition himself and strike at their flanks. Kill count: 10,000. The crowd was already more engaged than they had been yesterday. Aliens who had dismissed the human were now watching his every move with growing interest. Kill count: 15,000. War Chief Gormek leaned forward in his seat. The human had reached his previous day's total kill count in just a few hours. But more importantly, his fighting style was evolving. Yesterday, Taewon had been efficient but predictable. Today, he was adapting and improvising. When enemy aircraft appeared overhead, Taewon did not simply find cover and wait for them to pass. Instead, he used debris from destroyed vehicles to create improvised anti-aircraft weapons. When armored units blocked his path, he found ways to turn their own weapons against each other. Kill count: 20,000. The arena's artificial intelligence was working harder now, generating increasingly complex scenarios to challenge the human. It deployed heavy battlesuits that required specialized tactics to defeat. It created environmental hazards like collapsing buildings and toxic atmosphere zones. It sent elite special forces units that had never been defeated by a single fighter. Tae-wan handled each new challenge with what looked like casual competence. He made the battlesuits trip over their own size and weight. He used environmental hazards as weapons against his enemies. He outmaneuvered elite units by thinking 3 steps ahead of their tactics. Kill count, 25,000. Bin Na Park, the human, technical officer monitoring the arena systems, noticed something unusual in the data streams. The AI was adapting faster than normal, creating new enemy types and scenarios at an accelerated rate. It was learning from Tae-wan's performance and trying desperately to find his limits. But the more it learned, the more creative Tae-wan became. In response, kill count, 30,000. Vextar the Destroyer sat motionless in the Draknari section, his yellow eyes fixed on the human below. This was approaching his lifetime record, achieved over 7 years of competition. The human might reach it in just 2 days. The arena transformed again. Tae-wan now faced a recreation of a famous historical battle, the Siege of Kethmoran, where an entire Draknari legion had been defeated by superior numbers and firepower. The scenario had never been completed by a single fighter. Tae-wan studied the battlefield for exactly 10 seconds. Then he began to move. His approach was unlike anything the aliens had seen before. Instead of trying to fight the massive enemy army directly, he identified key supply lines and communication networks. He struck at support units, leaving frontline forces without ammunition or orders. He used the terrain to create bottlenecks that turned the enemy's numbers against them. Kill count, 35,000. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the constantly chittering chitin collective had stopped making noise. Every alien in the arena was focused entirely on the small human figure, moving through the holographic battlefield with impossible grace and efficiency. Kill count 40,000. Dr. Hee-jin Cho stared at her medical readings in amazement. Tae-wan's heart rate was elevated, which was normal for extended combat, but his stress hormones were actually decreasing. His brain activity showed patterns she had seen before but never in a combat situation. He was enjoying himself. Kill count, 45,000. Arena Master Kolthek's 6 arms trembled slightly. The human was approaching records that had stood for decades, but more disturbing was how effortless he made it appear. Other record holders had achieved their numbers through years of grinding effort, pushing themselves to the absolute limits of endurance and skill. This human looked like he was having fun. Kill count, 47,032. The arena fell completely silent. Tae-wan had just matched Vextar's lifetime record. Every alien in the crowd turned to look at the great Draknari champion, whose scales had gone pale with shock. But Tae-wan was not finished. The simulation continued, and so did he. Kill count, 50,000. The number appeared on screens throughout the arena, glowing in bright letters that seemed to burn into the minds of every observer. 50,000 confirmed kills. More than any single being in galactic history had ever achieved, and the human showed no signs of slowing down. By the end of the second day, Tae-wan's kill count had reached 58,394. The arena had never seen anything like it. Aliens who had never shown interest in the tournament were now traveling from across the galaxy just to witness what everyone was calling the human phenomenon. Arena Master Kolthek made an announcement that shocked everyone present. The human competitor has requested to continue through the standard rest period. Our systems have never been tested for continuous operation beyond 48 hours. However, we will accommodate this unprecedented request. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. No being in galactic history had ever attempted to fight for 3 consecutive days. The physical and mental strain should have been impossible to endure. Captain Dong-hyun Lee stood up in the human section, his face pale with worry. Tae-wan, are you certain about this? You don't need to prove anything more. You've already made history. Tae-wan looked up at his fellow human and smiled calmly. I appreciate your concern, Captain, but I feel fine. Actually, I feel great. Dr. Hee-jin Cho checked her medical readings for the 100th time that day. Everything showed that Tae-wan was telling the truth. His vital signs indicated someone who was alert, focused, and remarkably unstressed for someone who had been fighting for 2 straight days. As the 3rd day began, the arena deployed scenarios that had never been used in competition before. These were theoretical combat situations designed to test entire military units, not individual fighters. The AI was being pushed far beyond its normal parameters. Taiwan faced massive war machines that towered above the battlefield like walking buildings. Each one carried enough firepower to level a city block. The simulation expected him to run and hide, using hit-and-run tactics to slowly chip away at these giants. Instead, Taiwan climbed onto the first war machine and began dismantling it from the inside. He used its own weapons systems against its companions, turning the giant robots into his personal artillery platform. Within an hour, he had destroyed an entire mechanized army using their own equipment. Kill count, 65,000. The Chiton Collective's hive mind was struggling to process what they were seeing. Their entire understanding of individual combat capability was being rewritten in real time. How could a single organism, especially one as physically unremarkable as a human, achieve such results? The Vorthak telepaths had given up trying to read Taiwan's mind. Every time they attempted to scan his thoughts, they encountered something that made no sense to them. His mental state showed complete calm and focus, but underneath that was something they could only describe as joy. Kill count, 70,000. War Chief Gormek sat in stunned silence. His entire military career, everything he had learned about warfare and combat, seemed meaningless compared to what this human was accomplishing. The Dreknari were supposed to be the galaxy's greatest warriors, but none of them could even imagine fighting at this level. The Arena AI began generating scenarios based on historical galactic conflicts. It recreated the Battle of the Burning Nebula, where 3 fleets had fought for 6 days straight. It simulated the siege of Corvash Prime, where an entire planet's defense force had been overwhelmed. It even attempted to recreate the legendary Last Stand at Devil's Gate, where 10,000 soldiers had held off a 1,000,000-strong enemy horde. Taiwan fought through each historical recreation as if he had been there personally. He seemed to understand military tactics that had taken alien civilizations centuries to develop. More than that, he improved upon them, finding solutions to problems that had caused legendary defeats. Kill count, 80,000. Binna Park was working frantically to keep the arena systems operational. The AI was generating combat scenarios faster than the computers could process them, creating a backlog of data that threatened to crash the entire network. The arena had never been designed for this level of continuous operation. "We need to slow this down," she called out to Arena Master Kolthek. "The systems are overheating. If we don't take a break soon, we might lose everything." But when Kolthek relayed this concern to Taiwan, the human simply nodded and said, "I understand. Do what you need to do to keep the equipment safe. I can adapt to any technical limitations." Kill count, 85,000. As the 3rd day continued, something remarkable happened. Aliens throughout the galaxy began abandoning their normal activities to watch the tournament broadcasts. Factories shut down as workers crowded around viewing screens. Military academies canceled classes so students could study Taiwan's tactics. Even government meetings were postponed as leaders tried to understand what this meant for galactic politics. The human was not just breaking records, he was demonstrating capabilities that no one had believed possible. If humans could fight at this level, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? Kill count, 90,000. Flux Prime had been analyzing Taiwan's performance for 3 days straight, and the Lumina being was no closer to understanding how the human achieved such results. His weapons were primitive, his armor was basic, and his physical capabilities seemed average for his species. Yet somehow, he was outperforming beings with superior technology and enhanced physiology. The energy being began to suspect that humans possessed some fundamental advantage that other species lacked. But what could it be? Kill count, 95,000. Vexitar the Destroyer finally stood up and walked toward the arena exit. He could not bear to watch anymore. Everything he had achieved in his 7-year career was being surpassed by a single human in 3 days. His reputation, his record, his entire identity as the galaxy's greatest warrior was crumbling before his eyes. Other competitors began following his example. There was no point in trying to compete after this. The human had redefined what was possible in combat sports. Kill count, 98,347. As the third day drew to a close, Arena Master Kolthek prepared to make another announcement. But before he could speak, alarms began sounding throughout the arena. The massive display screens flickered and showed error messages. The arena's computer systems had finally reached their absolute limits. The kill counter was approaching numbers that the software had never been designed to handle. Taewon looked up at the flashing warning lights and nodded calmly. "Should I stop for today to let you fix the technical problems?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything. The galaxy thought it knew about the limits of individual capability. The arena's technical team worked through the night to upgrade their computer systems. They had never imagined needing kill counters that could handle 6-digit numbers. Binna Park led a team of the galaxy's best technicians as they desperately tried to modify software that was never designed for what Taiwan was accomplishing. By the fourth day, representatives from every major government in the galaxy had arrived at the arena. The Draknari High Command sent their top military analysts. The Chiton Collective dispatched their most advanced thinking units. Even the mysterious Vorthak Council had sent additional telepaths to study the human phenomenon. When Taewon entered the arena for his fourth consecutive day, the crowd was larger than it had ever been in the tournament's history. Overflow viewing areas had been set up throughout the station, and live broadcasts were being transmitted to billions of beings across known space. "Systems are operational," Binna Park announced. "We have upgraded the arena's capabilities. The simulation can now handle theoretically unlimited scenarios." Arena Master Koltek's 6 arms moved nervously. "Human Taiwan Kim, you may continue when ready. The Arena AI has been authorized to deploy any scenario necessary to test your limits." Taewon nodded and took his position in the center of the combat zone. "I'm ready." The fourth day's scenarios were beyond anything that had ever been attempted in the arena. The AI began by recreating the Battle of 1,000 Suns, the largest space conflict in recorded history. Taewon found himself commanding a single fighter craft against an armada of capital ships that stretched beyond the horizon. He did not try to fight the massive fleet directly. Instead, he identified the command structures and communication networks that held the armada together. He struck at fuel depots and ammunition stores, causing chain reactions that destroyed dozens of ships at once. He used the fleet's own size against them, creating traffic jams and collisions in their formations. Kill count, 105,000. The number appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, and entire civilizations stopped what they were doing to stare at it. 100,000 kills. It was a number so large that most beings could not even comprehend what it meant. Dr. Hyejin Cho was reviewing 4 days of medical data, and what she found made no sense according to any known biology. Taewon's stress levels had continued to decrease throughout the competition. His heart rate was now lower than it had been when he started. His brain activity showed patterns consistent with deep relaxation and enjoyment. He was not being challenged by these scenarios. He was being entertained by them. Kill count, 110,000. The Arena AI began to panic in the way that artificial intelligences could panic. It started generating scenarios that violated its own programming limitations. It created enemies with impossible weapons and physics-defying abilities. It deployed environmental hazards that should have been instantly lethal. Taiwan adapted to each impossible challenge as if impossible things were perfectly normal. When enemies fired weapons that bent the laws of physics, he found ways to redirect those weapons back at their users. When the environment itself became hostile, he made it work in his favor. Kill count, 120,000. Mindrender Kethvar, the Vorthak competitor, stood up abruptly and left the arena. The telepathic being could not handle what he was sensing from the human's mind. There was something fundamentally different about how humans processed combat situations, something that made no sense to any other known species. The Vorthak Council immediately began emergency sessions to discuss what this meant for their understanding of galactic psychology and military capability. Kill count, 130,000. Captain Dong-hyun Lee was fielding communications from Earth's government every few minutes. Politicians and military leaders wanted to know if Taiwan represented typical human capability or if he was some kind of unique super soldier. The captain honestly did not know how to answer these questions. As far as he knew, Taiwan was just a normal accountant who enjoyed combat sports as a hobby. Kill count, 140,000. The Arena AI made one final desperate attempt to find the human's limits. It created a scenario that had never been attempted before. A perfect recreation of the theoretical Doomsday Protocol, a combat situation designed to test the absolute maximum capability of any fighting force. The scenario placed Taiwan at the center of a collapsing galaxy, with hostile forces attacking from every possible direction. Planets exploded around him, stars went nova, and entire fleets materialized from hyperspace every few seconds. It was a scenario designed to overwhelm any possible response. Taiwan looked around at the chaos surrounding him and smiled. Then he began to dance. There was no other way to describe his movements. He flowed through the impossible battlefield like music made visible, turning destruction into art. Every shot he fired eliminated multiple targets. Every movement put him in the perfect position to avoid incoming fire while setting up his next attack. He was not fighting the scenario. He was conducting it like a symphony. Kill count, 150,000. The crowd sat in absolute silence. What they were witnessing went beyond combat skills or military tactics. They were watching something that redefined what it meant to be a warrior. Kill count, 160,000. Flux Prime had stopped trying to analyze Taiwan's techniques. The Lumina being had reached a conclusion that it found deeply disturbing. Humans might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they did not even realize it themselves. Kill count, 170,000. Arena Master Koltek's hands were shaking as he watched. The displays, the numbers climbing on the screens represented more destruction than most planetary wars. And the human was accomplishing it all while looking like he was having the time of his life. Kill count, 180,000. As the fourth day ended, Taiwan finally paused. He looked up at the viewing areas where thousands of aliens stared down at him in stunned silence. "This is fun," he said simply. "I haven't had this much enjoyment in years. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." The casual comment sent shockwaves through every alien present. Fun? This level of combat performance was fun for humans? What exactly had the galaxy gotten itself into by making contact with Earth? The final day of the galactic weekend arrived with the entire known universe watching. News broadcasts on every inhabited world carried live coverage of the humans' performance. Military academies had declared mandatory viewing periods. Even children skipped school to witness what historians were already calling the most significant event in galactic combat history. Taiwan entered the arena for his fifth consecutive day, looking as fresh and alert as he had on the first morning. His equipment was clean, his posture was confident, and his expression showed the same calm focus that had amazed observers for 4 straight days. Arena Master Kolthek's announcement echoed through speakers that reached every corner of known space. Citizens of the galaxy, we begin the final day of what will surely be remembered as the most remarkable tournament in our history. The human competitor has achieved kill counts that exceed our ability to fully comprehend. The current number stood at 187,439. It was more than many entire civilizations had achieved in centuries of warfare. The Arena AI has one final scenario prepared, Koltek continued. We have programmed a recreation of the legendary battle of the Seven Suns, the most devastating conflict in recorded galactic history. No single being has ever attempted to face this scenario alone. The Battle of the Seven Suns was studied in every military academy as the ultimate example of impossible odds. 7 allied fleets had fought against the entire Draknari Empire at its peak strength. The battle had raged for 37 days and resulted in the deaths of over 40 million soldiers. It was considered the most challenging combat scenario that could ever exist. Taewon nodded calmly. I understand. I'm ready to begin. The arena transformed around him into a vast space battlefield. 7 different star systems appeared in the simulation, each one filled with massive fleets engaged in desperate combat. Taewon found himself in a small fighter craft at the center of it all, facing odds that defied mathematical calculation. The enemy forces included every type of military unit that had ever existed in galactic history. Battle cruisers the size of cities, fighter swarms that darkened entire star systems, orbital defense platforms that could destroy planets, and ground forces numbering in the billions. Any sane being would have been overwhelmed immediately by the sheer scope of the scenario. Taewon began by studying the battlefield for exactly 30 seconds. Then he started to move. His approach was unlike anything military strategists had ever conceived. Instead of trying to engage the massive enemy forces directly, he began manipulating the battlefield itself. He used gravitational fields to redirect asteroid belts into enemy formations. He caused stars to go nova at precisely calculated moments, eliminating entire fleets in chains of destruction. He turned the enemy's own weapons against each other by hijacking their communication networks. Kill count, 200,000. The number appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, and entire planetary populations stopped breathing for a moment. 200,000 confirmed kills. It was a number that redefined what individual capability could mean. But Taewon was just getting started. He began moving through the 7-star battlefield like a force of nature. Every action he took had cascading effects that eliminated thousands of enemies. He was not just fighting the Battle of the 7 Suns, he was winning it single-handedly. Kill count, 250,000. Dr. Heejin Cho had given up trying to understand Taewon's medical readings. According to every instrument she had, he was not experiencing combat stress. His brain patterns showed the same activity she might see in someone, solving a pleasant puzzle or playing a favorite game. This was recreation for him. Kill count, 300,000. In the viewing stands, alien representatives sat in stunned silence. The implications of what they were witnessing were staggering. If this human represented typical capability for his species, then humanity was not just another member race for the galactic community. They were potentially the dominant military force in known space, and they did not even seem to realize it. Kill count 350,000. The arena AI had stopped trying to challenge Taewon. Instead, it was simply documenting his performance for posterity. Future military historians would study these recordings for centuries, trying to understand how one being could achieve such results. Kill count, 400,000. As the final hours of the weekend approached, Taewon was facing the climax of the Battle of the 7 Suns scenario. The enemy had deployed their ultimate weapon, a planet-destroying device that could eliminate entire star systems. In the original historical battle, this weapon had forced the Allied forces to retreat. Taewon did not retreat. Instead, he infiltrated the weapon platform and reprogrammed it to target enemy forces. Within minutes, he had turned their ultimate weapon into his personal artillery system. Kill count, 450,000. Arena Master Kolthek's 6 arms were trembling as he watched the displays. The numbers had moved so far beyond anything imaginable that they felt more like abstract mathematics than actual combat statistics. Kill count, 500,000. The 500,000 mark caused spontaneous celebrations on some worlds and emergency government sessions on others. Humanity had just demonstrated capabilities that shifted the balance of power for the entire galaxy. As the weekend's final hour approached, Taewon completed the Battle of the 7 Suns scenario. The arena fell completely silent as the simulation ended, and his final statistics appeared on screens throughout known space. Final kill count, 523,847 confirmed eliminations. Total time, 124 hours and 17 minutes of continuous combat. Performance, evaluation. Beyond measurement parameters. Taewon set down his weapons and looked up at the viewing areas. His expression was calm and satisfied, like someone who had just finished an enjoyable hobby project. "That was excellent," he said clearly into the arena's microphones. "I really appreciate the opportunity to try new scenarios. The AI did a wonderful job creating challenging situations." He paused and smiled. "Though I should mention this was actually quite relaxing for me. Back on Earth, I usually achieve higher numbers during my weekend gaming sessions. I was taking it easy since this was a formal competition." The silence that followed this statement was so complete that it seemed to absorb all sound in the universe. Arena Master Kolthek finally found his voice. "Higher numbers? This was taking it easy?" "Oh yes," Taewan replied cheerfully. "My personal record at home is around 750,000, but I was being careful not to push too hard in front of an audience. I didn't want to seem like I was showing off." He gathered his equipment and headed toward the exit. "This was a great weekend. Thank you all for the hospitality. I should probably head home now. I have to go back to work on Monday." As Taewan left the arena, the galaxy sat in stunned silence. The human had just casually mentioned that this record-breaking performance was him holding back. What exactly were humans capable of when they were not being careful? The question would reshape galactic politics, military doctrine, and diplomatic relations for generations to come. And Taewan Kim, senior accountant from Earth, was completely unaware that he had just made humanity the most feared and respected species in known space. He was already looking forward to his next vacation.